a man and a woman stand in the shadows of heavy foliage. The cool evening wind raising the hair on their arms. Same reflex. Same physical instinct to run, to duck, to look away. Most people read these moments and assume this is the expected. The awe is so heavy it forces the human body downward. But pay attention to the tension in this scene. Peter begs Jesus to leave, but Peter himself does not jump into the water. He stays at the carpenter's feet. The weight of the divine drives him to his knees, but it does not drive him out of the boat. Because biblical awe does something completely counterintuitive to the human heart. Biological panic creates distance. Awe creates gravity. When you are terrified of an immediate threat, your only biological goal is survival. You run. You hide in the shadows of the garden. You weave sticky leaves together. You put a smoking mountain between yourself and the fire. You want the danger as far away from your physical body as possible. That is the instinct of the garden. That is the reaction of the camp at the boundary line. But covenantal reverence works in the exact opposite direction. It does not repel. It attracts. Think of the physical forces holding the solar system together. The sun is a localized explosion of nuclear fire burning at 27 million degrees. It is absolute, annihilating power. You do not touch it. You do not treat it casually. You do not stare directly into the white glare without burning the retina of your eye. But you also do not run from it. Natural posture of humanity before the Creator. We are taught that to understand God is to be terrified of Him. You orbit it. You build your days around it. You plant your seeds by its cycle. You depend on the exact distance of its radiation to keep the blood in your veins from freezing into solid ice. Its power is overwhelming. Its gravity is life. This is the exact engine of biblical obedience. If your spiritual life is fueled by passion, by the dread of a cosmic hammer dropping on your head, your faith is just an exhausting hostage negotiation. You will constantly measure your steps. You will hide your failures in the dark. You will frantically scrub the dirt off your hands before anyone can see. You will bargain with God like a terrified prisoner bargaining with a volatile warden. Because you cannot love a warden. You can only appease him. But if your obedience is fueled by yira, by the staggering weight of a holy God who willingly stepped into your sinking boat, the mechanics of your faith fundamentally change. Obedience is no longer a survival tactic. It is a gravitational orbit. You stop trying to manage the divine. You stop flinching every time the sky turns dark. You start rearranging your entire life around His center. You freely confess the dirt on your hands because the awe of His proximity is stronger than the shame of your failure. We are told, from pulpits and Sunday school classrooms, that the highest form of religious devotion is absolute. Trembling fear. You want to be near the fire, even if the heat demands that you change. And this explains exactly what happens next in the biblical story. The Israelites who begged for distance at the mountain are about to receive a set of architectural blueprints in the middle of the desert. And the dimensions of those blueprints will completely subvert the human instinct to run. The hammer strikes the anvil, shaping solid gold into the wings of a cherub. The dry desert air smells of freshly cut acacia wood, crushed myrrh, and the sharp, metallic tang of brass. In the center of a barren, sun-scorched wasteland, a massive structure begins to rise from the dust. Heavy curtains of finely woven linen, dyed in deep scarlet and royal purple, billow and snap in the arid wind. When the final bronze peg is driven deep into the sand, the sky above the camp begins to change. The thick, terrifying cloud that once wrapped the jagged peaks of Mount Sinai begins to move. It descends slowly, deliberately, until it settles directly over the heavy fabric of the tent. Just a few chapters earlier, these exact same people were stumbling backward over the rocks, covering their ears and begging Moses to put a permanent buffer between their fragile human bodies and the consuming fire of the divine, because God is holy, and you are not. The only logical response is to cower. But what if we have entirely misunderstood the assignment? They were entirely convinced that proximity meant certain death. They wanted the presence of God to stay far away on the mountain, locked safely behind a definitive boundary line. But look at the geography of the camp now. The tribes of Israel do not pitch their tents as far away from the tabernacle as possible. They do not flee to the edges of the wilderness. They arrange their homes in a massive, deliberate circle, with the front flaps of their own tents opening directly toward the Holy of Holies. They are not constructing a fortress to keep the fire contained. They are pitching a dwelling place so the storm can move into the exact center of their neighborhood. This is the visual, architectural proof of what happens when human panic is finally replaced by covenantal reverence. The terrifying, unapproachable power that shattered their composure at the boundary line has not diminished in its intensity. The God inside the tent is just as holy, just as absolute, as the God on the mountain. But his intention has been fully revealed. The tabernacle is not a barricade designed to protect a fragile people from a volatile, angry judge. It is a mechanism designed to bring a broken people into the presence of a holy king. Every heavy curtain, every bronze wash basin, and every drop of sacrificial blood serves a single, vital purpose. This is not just a translation debate for seminary professors. It is a diagnosis of how you relate to the unseen. They are the carefully designed conditions that allow a finite, flawed nation to safely orbit the absolute perfection of the Creator without being incinerated by the heat. The yira, the overwhelming awe, remains completely intact. Because the veil is violently thick and the inner room is pitched in absolute darkness, you do not just casually stroll into the Holy of Holies, but the pashad, the blind, biological terror begins to evaporate. Because when the sun sets over the wasteland and the freezing desert night sets in, that massive pillar of fire is standing right in the middle of their camp, radiating warmth and providing light for the very people who used to run from it. Awe draws them in. Reverence keeps them close. The mountain became a tent. The untouchable fire became a neighbor. But the journey of that holy presence was never meant to end in an ancient desert. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the geometry of that ancient desert camp. The deliberate, daily choice to tie back the front flap of your canvas tent and look directly at the very smoke that used to make you stumble backward in terror. If you are in a season where your spiritual life feels heavy, where your primary motivation is just trying to avoid making the Creator angry, you might be carrying a profound misunderstanding in your chest. You might be confusing biological trauma with holy reverence. If you believe the central instruction of Scripture is to be terrified of the one who made you, your faith will always be built. You might be reading the English text and constantly bracing yourself for a lightning bolt, treating your faith like a hostage negotiation, where one wrong move triggers the wrath of a volatile warden. But the God of the biblical narrative is not asking you to cower in the bushes with crushed, sticky fig leaves in your hands. He is not trying to trigger your nervous system's fight-or-flight response. True reverence is not a demand for your panic. It is the safety of a gravitational orbit. When you finally understand the difference between pachad and yira, the pressure to constantly manage your own image completely evaporates. You realize that you do not have to hide your failures in the dark, because the God who possesses absolute, blinding holiness is the exact same God who willingly steps onto the wet, scale-covered planks of your sinking boat. He knows exactly how broken you are, and he does not jump into the water. He stays on the bench. He wants you to draw near to the fire, not because the fire is entirely tame, but because the fire is entirely good. It is the only light that actually warms the freezing desert night. If you have spent years running from the presence of God on a foundation of anxiety, you will obey simply to avoid being crushed. You will live your entire spiritual life checking over your shoulder, because someone told you he was just waiting to crush you. You have been robbed of the awe that was meant to hold your life together. You have been running from the sun because you misunderstood the heat. But when you trace this single thread from a shattered garden all the way to the end of the text, a completely different pattern emerges. A man and a woman hide in the leaves of a shattered garden, and the Creator walks into the shadows to find them. A shepherd covers his face in the scorching desert, and a burning bush refuses to turn him to ash. A terrified nation backs away from the boundary line of a smoking mountain, and God hands them the blueprints to move into their neighborhood. A fisherman collapses on the wet wooden planks of a sinking boat, and a holy carpenter stays seated on the bench. A prophet falls to the stone floor of a smoke-filled temple, and a burning coal purges the ruin from his lips. A thick veil hangs heavy in the absolute darkness of the Holy of Holies, and the final breath of a savior tears it completely in two. A group of women tremble at the blinding light of an empty tomb, and the risen king simply speaks a name in the dawn, waiting for the lightning bolt to drop. You will mistake trauma for reverence. The fear of the Lord is not a threat. Same reverence. Same awe. One continuous invitation. If this shifted something in how you read the text, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from running from a God they think is constantly angry. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient words. And may the God who has never once asked for your panic draw you into an orbit so close and a reverence so deep that you finally drop the fig leaves and step out of the dark. It is a gravitational pull. To feel the weight of what is actually happening in these stories, you have to look closely at a chaotic afternoon in the wilderness. You have to stand at the base of a mountain covered in black smoke. Fig leaves are crushed in their hands, the green sap sticky against their skin, hastily woven together to cover their sudden, crushing shame. You have to listen to a man named Moses say two completely contradictory things in the exact same breath. And the paradox he introduces will change how you read every encounter with God on the page. We have a language problem. The English language is a massive, sprawling vocabulary. But when it comes to the internal world of human emotion, it can sometimes function like a blunt instrument. We take vastly different human experiences and shove them into the exact same linguistic box. Think about how you experience fear in the modern world. Your brain registers a threat, a shadow moving in a dark alley, a sudden swerve of headlights in your lane, a medical diagnosis delivered by a doctor sitting in a sterile, white room. The biological response is instantaneous and involuntary. Your mouth goes dry. Your heart hammers against your ribs. Your blood pulls away from your extremities, leaving your hands cold as your nervous system floods with adrenaline, preparing your body to either fight or run for your life. This is the physiological mechanics of terror. It is the instinct of a prey animal trying to survive a predator. And because we only have one primary word for this emotion, in English, they hear a sound. Not the cracking of thunder, not the roar of a flash flood. We take this exact biological response, the cold sweat, the panic, the desperate urge to escape, and we map it directly onto the biblical command to fear the Lord. We read the ancient text through the lens of our modern nervous system. We subconsciously turn God into the shadow in the alley. We frame him as the volatile authority figure who might snap at any moment. The unpredictable boss waiting for us to make a mistake. The judge hovering over our lives with a heavy, wooden gavel. But this creates an impossible psychological paradox. You cannot genuinely love a being you are biologically programmed to run away from. You cannot find rest in a presence that constantly triggers your fight or flight response. This biological terror is not a foundation for worship. It is a reflex for survival. When modern readers encounter the phrase, "the fear of God," they assume the text is demanding a posture of perpetual anxiety, as if the goal of the spiritual life is simply to avoid making the Creator angry. We reduce the grand, cosmic relationship between heaven and earth to a hostage situation, holding our breath and hoping we don't accidentally trigger a divine landmine. But the ancient writers did not suffer from our linguistic poverty. The Hebrew language possesses a sharp, surgical precision when it comes to describing the human experience of the unseen. They had completely different words for the panic of a city about to be besieged. It is the rhythmic, deliberate sound of footsteps walking through the garden dirt, and they press their bare backs against the rough bark of a tree, the dread of an approaching storm, and the overwhelming, gravitational weight of standing in the presence of absolute perfection. To see exactly how the English translation has flattened and distorted the text, you cannot just look at a dictionary. You have to watch the language collide with reality in the most terrifying moment of the Old Testament. You have to stand with a newly freed people in the desert dust, choking on the smell of ozone and sulfur, watching a mountain catch fire. The desert floor vibrates. The granite peaks of Mount Sinai vanish inside a thick, violent storm cloud. Lightning tears across the dark sky, lighting up the wasteland in jagged flashes of white. The air smells like hot ozone and crushed stone. A trumpet blast echoes through the camp, growing louder and louder until it rattles in their chests and rings in their teeth. The people of Israel stand at the boundary line, choking on the dust, their hands covering their ears. They are a nation of former slaves. They know violence. They know the crack of the whip. They know the absolute wrath of a pharaoh, but they have never seen power like this. The physical force of the mountain is too much. The sensory overload breaks them. They stumble backward, away from the smoke, holding their breath, waiting for the executioner to arrive. This is the first time humanity experiences the divine after everything breaks. They retreat from the boundary markers. They look at Moses, their voices trembling over the deafening noise of the thunder. "You speak to us, and we will listen," they say. "But do not let God speak to us, or we will die." They are experiencing pure biological panic. They are exhibiting the exact response of a prey animal desperate to survive a predator. They want distance. They want a buffer. They want an intermediary to stand between them and the fire. And Moses turns to face them. The storm rages behind him. The ground continues to shake beneath his sandals. He looks at a million terrified people, and he shouts a single, utterly baffling sentence. "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that his fear may be before you, that you may not sin. Do not fear, so that you might fear. Do not be afraid of God, so that you can have the fear of God." In English, this sentence is an impossible paradox. It looks like nonsense. It reads like a leader panicking under pressure and fumbling his words. You cannot command a terrified crowd to stop feeling an emotion in order to immediately produce that exact same emotion. But Moses is not confused. He is not making a mistake. He is not contradicting himself in the middle of a storm. And they do exactly what we still do. They hide. We see this reaction again and again in the text. He is drawing a line between two entirely different realities. To understand the line Moses just drew in the sand, you have to strip away the English translation completely. You have to look at the original ancient words he actually yelled into the wind. Because in the original language, Moses did not use the same word twice. And the difference between those two words changes the entire nature of who you are dealing with when you close your eyes to pray. Unroll the heavy parchment of the Torah and look closely at the ink of Exodus chapter 20. Verse 20. Moses is speaking to a crowd of people who are physically shaking, covered in a cold sweat, desperate to put distance between themselves and the fire. He looks at them and says, "Do not fear, so that the fear of God may be with you." The English translation collapses a massive theological distinction into a single, confusing sentence. But the Hebrew vocabulary of fear is incredibly precise. When the ancient writers want to describe pure, biological terror, the dread of an invading army, and the panic of a hunted animal, they frequently reach for the word pakad. It is the physical trembling of the knees. It is the sudden, violent rush of adrenaline that tells your nervous system to escape the danger immediately. A shepherd covers his face in a burning desert because a bush refuses to turn to ash. That is the exact reflex the Israelites are experiencing as they back away from the boundary line. But when Moses tells them what the mountain is actually trying to produce in them, he points to a completely different reality. The word for the fear God desires is the Hebrew yar, or its noun form, yirah. Yare appears over 300 times in the Old Testament, and its range of meaning is vast. While it can describe being afraid of a threat, when it is directed at the divine, it shifts into a completely different register. Yare means profound, covenantal reverence. It is the absolute, overwhelming awe you experience when you stand at the edge of the ocean during a hurricane. Or when you watch a massive supercell storm roll across the plains. You are not running away in blind panic. You are rooted to the spot, captivated by a weight and a beauty that makes you feel incredibly small. If seeing the texture of these ancient words is suddenly making the text click for you, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we dig into the original language hiding beneath your English Bible. So, Moses is asking, a priest collapses onto the cold stone floor when the temple suddenly fills with thick, blinding smoke, a traumatized people to trade their panic for something much deeper. He is telling them that God did not descend in fire to terrify them into submission. The fear of the Lord is not the dread of a slave waiting for the whip. It is the awe of a creature standing in the unfiltered presence of the Creator. This is why the book of Proverbs can later declare that this specific yirah is the very beginning of wisdom. It reorients your entire universe around the correct center of gravity, aligning your life with the reality of who is actually on the throne. But to see exactly how this awe operates, when it collides with a human body, you cannot just look at a desert mountain. You have to fast forward 1,500 years, step onto a wet wooden boat, and watch a fisherman realize exactly who is sitting next to him. The sun rises over the Sea of Galilee, turning the water the color of hammered copper. The wooden deck of the fishing boat is slick with morning dew. Peter is exhausted. His muscles ache from a long, useless night of pulling empty nets through black water, and his clothes smell of sharp algae and sweat. A carpenter from Nazareth sits in his boat and tells him to let the nets down one more time. A fisherman falls to his knees on a wooden deck, seawater soaking through his tunic, begging his teacher to get out of the boat. Peter protests, but he drops the course. Heavy ropes back into the deep. Suddenly, the lines pull taut. The braided fibers groan under an impossible weight. The dark water beside the boat begins to boil with silver scales. The haul is so immense, so violent in its abundance, that the wooden hull actually begins to list, taking on freezing lake water over the gunwales. Look at what Peter does in this exact moment. He does not celebrate. He does not calculate the market value of the catch. He does not look at the frantic fish at all. He looks at the man sitting quietly on the wooden bench, and Peter's knees buckle. He collapses onto the wet, scale-covered planks, freezing water soaking through his tunic. He looks up at Jesus from the floor of a sinking boat and begs him to leave. "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man." "O Lord," Jesus has not raised a hand. He has not spoken a single word of judgment. He has not threatened Peter with a storm or a plague. He has just delivered the greatest financial miracle of this fisherman's entire life. And yet, Peter is utterly undone. This is not the panic of a prey animal. It is the collapse of a shadow standing in front of the sun. Peter is experiencing yirah. The raw, unfiltered proximity to absolute holiness shatters his composure. When the finite comes into direct, unmediated contact with the infinite, the only appropriate physical posture is the floor.